Hey there, welcome back to High Infidelity, the best channel for cheating stories. Like and subscribe to channel for more spicy stories. Now, let's get into today's story video.
Wife is having an emotional affair, at least. The title speaks for itself. I discovered several text messages a few days ago while spying. I snooped after approximately 3 weeks of emotional withdrawal, lack of physical touch, and her just being different. I discovered she missed work around 2 weeks ago and lied repeatedly about having arrangements with him this weekend. There were additional stuff in there, like her asking whether he was upset about her buddy being around now and how glad she is to see him again. When questioned, she grew combative but insists she has never cheated on me, even to friends and relatives. I requested to read her texts, but she had them hidden. I ended up couch surfing after the argument, and she says, "If we don't have trust, what do we have?" She has never done anything like this before. She stated she hasn't been pleased with us for nearly 3 years since our child was born. I'm at a loss for what to do, and I really want to give her the benefit of the doubt and believe it was all in her head. We've had our disagreements, and she's asked for some distance so she can work things out with us. She's been stating she wants space since October of last year. If she's looking to this person for something we don't have, I understand and can get beyond it if she's willing to put in the effort. But I'm not sure I can if it became physical with them. I'm sick to my stomach about all of this. We also have a couples therapy appointment scheduled for this Friday, but they won't tell me whether or not we're truly separated. Story 2. I caught my wife cheating with her boss. I'm not sure of how to move on. My wife and I have been married for over 10 years. We've been married for over 5 years and have gone through a lot together. We met in college, and I took additional courses to catch up so that we could graduate together in 2012. Soon after graduation, I saved up enough money to attend a game design school in Canada, and I offered her to join me. The simplest way for Canada to admit her was for us to marry. So I proposed, and we married 3 months later. We're just a few weeks away from beginning our new life in Canada. Everything was fantastic and wonderful for a time since everything was new to us. Because the school I enrolled in was incredibly rigorous and demanding, studying gradually began to take up more and more of my time. I was ready to devote all of my time and efforts to it, since the program's success would decide my prospects of finding a job in the business. This, of course, made her feel lonely and unimportant. This was one of the first obstacles we encountered as a team, and they only became more and more intricate from there. This, in some ways, cooled us and helped us to communicate more effectively as a pair. It compelled us to identify our long-term objectives as people, and it highlighted our differences for us to work on, which we did. I ultimately obtained the job I had worked so hard for, and things gradually improved. The relationship had its ups and downs, but it was never utterly unbearable. Until last year, that is. It was evident that some of our disagreements as a couple were becoming less difficult to resolve. There were, however, certain essential variances that were always there. So I chose to accept until I began to detest the amount of emotional strain I was putting myself through in order to enjoy a single weekend without bickering. This finally made me feel like I was married to a little sister who was trying to avoid an argument by walking on eggshells. My libido had entirely vanished, and I was frantic to discover out why. This is when the snowball began to roll down the hill. I couldn't stop staring at her as if she were demanding too much of me, and I could feel myself sinking into a vicious cycle that would lead me away from what I had battled for so long. I got more angry at my choices. Eventually, I felt entirely disconnected, and I began to rely only on my job and my interests to get me through the day. She expressed how lonely she felt, and with what little energy I had left, I attempted to convince her that this was all transitory, that this cycle was unusually dark, but that we would soon rise together and feel better again. When I found out last week, it felt like I was jumping into very cold water. I saw a text message from her supervisor flashing across the screen of her computer. It was late, and she had informed me she had gone dancing with her friends, so this was a red signal that I couldn't help but click on and initiate the discussion. I read a lot of stuff I wish I hadn't. As I scrolled through the discussion, I could feel my heart sinking and thumping harder and quicker. She was describing how his sister saw him touching her knee, and I ultimately discovered a message from him confirming interaction. I'm getting nauseated just thinking about it. I wish I had known things were that horrible earlier. After that night, I had a day to contemplate before confronting her. She revealed everything. While she was doing so, tears streamed down her cheeks, and I was taken aback. I couldn't exhibit any feelings at the time, since I was terrified and disappointed. I took it all in and offered her two options. We could stop everything right then and there, or we could gather our belongings and go away. Or we might put the relationship on hold and continue to live together while we figure out what to do, with the caveat that she give her 2-week notice and resign her job. She decided to give the latter a go. It's been a week and a half now. This really jolted us out of our comfort zones, and things began to improve for every one of us. Seeing her as something I might lose motivated me to fight for something I had taken for granted, and my desire resurfaced. I had missed gazing at her in that way. But what transpired was utterly incorrect and contradictory. We've gone through a lot, and we've chosen to fight for this for as long as we can. I'm certain that what we once had was unusual, and I'm prepared to fight for it. But fear is always there today, and I'm always questioning if I'm making the correct choices. I feel like tossing everything away is foolish, especially now that things are finally better. I told her that I couldn't fully forgive her, but I understood why she felt the way she did. What occurred was simply a symptom of the status of the relationship, and I'll confess that it could have been me in her situation when things went bad for me. Where am I going to draw the line? Am I being too idealistic? Is this a trend that will only repeat itself after we've reached the bottom of our relationship cycle and are back in our comfort zones? It's hard to think it's already been this long. After revisiting my initial post, I realized that a lot of things are clearer and more defined today, but a lot hasn't really changed since then. I took the vacation week immediately after everything occurred and went back to visit my parents and sisters. When I informed them about the issue, they were all disappointed. Fortunately, they were emphatic about honoring whatever option I thought was the best. After much deliberation, I realized that the least we could do as a couple was attempt to grow out of our circumstances and see how we felt about it. Unsurprisingly, this was a pretty utopian concept. Things were just not that straightforward. We had to move out of our apartment to a new one shortly after my absence for unrelated reasons, and this had been planned from before the event occurred. Packing was a dreadful process. Should we place our belongings in different boxes? Or are we going to be pragmatic for the time being and see what happens later? We moved into a new apartment, and the relationship seemed to be frozen in time for a few months. There were unpacked boxes and framed posters that had never been hung. It was hard to move into our new flat without knowing whether it would be our home or not. It was fascinating to see how our surroundings precisely reflected how we felt on the inside. For me, it was simply getting through the days, not having to think about going ahead in that area. By then, I was extremely emotionally weary, and I took advantage of the opportunity to pretend that everything was stable for a time. We have to move on at some point. Get out of the bind we created. My resolve to make things better for us was swiftly tested anytime I imagined us as a fresh marriage. What I believed was just residual anger that would eventually go away only crystallized and took form inside me into what might be characterized as demons. For example, she would go out with a female friend, and everything was okay until I sent a message to check in with her. And after just 20 minutes of waiting, those bad sentiments would turn into a lot of worry, anger, and desperation. I couldn't do anything else. This condition had taken over every idea in my head. This was such a bad experience that I just had to go through it twice before concluding for sure that this idea was not going to work. I sat down and discussed everything she could do to reduce my fear and recover my trust. These terms were, in my opinion, fairly reasonable. I expected her to message me whenever she came or left work, as well as if she had any plans for the evening. The other requirement was that she pay attention to her cell phone for calls or messages, since she had a nasty tendency of forgetting about it for hours at a time. She wasn't happy about it, even after I explained that it was just a temporary situation and that she needed to recover my confidence. I understand why these circumstances could be objectionable to some individuals. But if she couldn't do it for me, I thought we weren't both trying hard enough. This was what I needed to know in order to shift the limbo in the other way. Sadly, but for the best, we decided to call it quits on our romance. Soon after, she began searching for flats to rent. She finally admitted that she was still in touch with her former employer. I believe we made the correct choice. She packed her belongings and left yesterday night. We're on decent terms. I don't see us being friends right now, but I hope we can at some point in the future. She handed me her apartment keys, and that was the end of it. I really wish her the best and hope she finds the happiness she seeks. My current goal is to have some fun and enjoy my alone. I have a long list of games I want to play and new things I want to learn. Part of me is still afraid, but I know it's only a matter of time until everything returns to normal. I'm pleased I'll be there to see it all again.